The rain hit my face like tiny needles as I stood on my own front porch, my soaked pajamas clinging to my shivering body. The sound of the deadbolt clicking into place behind me still echoed in my ears, followed by my son Marcus's cold voice. Through the thick oak door I had chosen and paid for 15 years ago. Maybe now you'll learn to mind your own business, Mother. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I pressed my palm against the door, water dripping from my graying hair onto the welcome mat that mockingly read, "Home Sweet Home." 24 hours earlier, I had been Dr. Eleanor Hartwell, respected pediatric surgeon, loving mother, and what I thought was the head of my own household. Now I stood locked out in a thunderstorm at 2 a.m, betrayed by the child I had sacrificed everything to raise. What Marcus didn't know was that while he thought he was teaching me a lesson, he had just made the biggest mistake of his 32-year life. The rain washing over me wasn't just water, it was washing away the last of my maternal illusions. Because tomorrow, when the banks opened, my ungrateful son was about to discover exactly who really controlled the family fortune he had been taking for granted. The events that led to that rain-soaked moment began 3 months earlier, though I now realize the seeds were planted years before. I had just returned from my evening shift at Children's Memorial Hospital, my scrubs still smelling faintly of antiseptic, when I noticed the silver BMW in my driveway. A car I didn't recognize, parked with the casual arrogance of someone who belonged there. Inside my Tudor-style home in Riverside Heights, I found Marcus in the living room with a woman I had never seen before. She was perhaps 25, blonde, and draped across my Italian leather sofa like she owned it. Marcus, my son who hadn't held a steady job in 3 years, was pouring what I immediately recognized as my 1987 Dom Pérignon into 2 crystal flutes. "Mother," Marcus said without looking up, his tone carrying that familiar note of entitled dismissal. "This is Sophia. We're celebrating." I set my medical bag down carefully, noting how Sophia's designer dress probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Celebrating what exactly? "Our engagement," Sophia announced, extending her left hand to display a diamond ring that made my breath catch. The stone was easily 3 carats, set in platinum, and I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly where the money for it had come from. "Congratulations," I managed, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "When did this happen?" "Last week," Marcus replied, finally meeting my eyes with a defiance I had been seeing more frequently. "We're planning a fall wedding, small ceremony, maybe 200 guests. Nothing too extravagant." Small ceremony, 200 guests. The casual way he said it made my chest tighten. I had been supporting Marcus financially since he graduated college with a degree in philosophy that he claimed was too sophisticated for the mundane job market. His monthly allowance from his trust fund, which I managed as trustee, was supposed to cover his basic living expenses while he found his passion. Clearly, his passion had become spending money he hadn't earned on a lifestyle he couldn't afford. "That sounds lovely," I said carefully. "Have you thought about the budget?" Sophia laughed, a tinkling sound that grated against my nerves. "Oh, Mrs. Hartwell, you don't need to worry about that. Marcus has been so generous with the wedding preparations. We've already put deposits down on the Riverside Country Club, and I've ordered my dress from Milan." The Riverside Country Club. Their wedding packages started at $50,000 for a small ceremony. I excused myself to change out of my scrubs, but instead of going to my bedroom, I went straight to my home office. With trembling fingers, I logged into the trust account that held Marcus's inheritance from his father. The account that I had been carefully growing for over a decade, adding my own money to ensure my son would have security for life. The balance made me physically nauseous. In the past 6 months, Marcus had withdrawn nearly $200,000. The wedding ring, The car payments for the BMW I now realized was his. The luxury apartment he had moved into, claiming he needed independence. The lavish dinners and weekend trips to Las Vegas that he had casually mentioned in passing. I sat back in my leather chair, staring at the computer screen. My late husband James would have been devastated. He had worked 16-hour days as a commercial real estate developer to build the fortune that was meant to secure our family's future. He had died of a heart attack at 55. His last words to me a whispered promise to take care of Marcus, to make sure our son understood the value of hard work and integrity. Instead, I had raised a man who saw money as an endless river flowing from sources he never questioned. A knock on my office door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Mom, can we talk?" Marcus entered without waiting for permission, his tall frame filling the doorway. He had his father's dark hair and strong jawline, but where James had carried himself with quiet dignity, Marcus moved with the casual arrogance of someone who had never truly struggled for anything. "Sophia and I have been talking," he began, settling into the chair across from my desk without invitation. "We think it would be best if you signed over full control of the trust fund to me. I'm 32 years old, and it's embarrassing to have to ask my mother for permission every time I want to make a withdrawal." I kept my expression neutral, though inside I felt something cold and hard crystallizing. "The trust was set up the way your father wanted it. Until you're 35, I remain the trustee." "That's just a technicality," Marcus waved dismissively. "Dad couldn't have anticipated that I'd be getting married, starting a family. Sophia and I want to buy a house, something worthy of our future children. The apartment is fine for now, but we need to think bigger." "A house," I repeated slowly. "Have you considered getting a job to help pay for this house?" The question seemed to genuinely confuse him. "Mom, we've talked about this. The job market is incredibly competitive right now. I have a philosophy degree from Stanford. I'm not going to take some entry-level position that's beneath my education level. Besides, with the trust fund, we don't really need to worry about traditional employment." "The trust fund isn't meant to replace a career, Marcus. It's meant to provide security and opportunity." "Exactly," he said, leaning forward, with enthusiasm. "The opportunity to live well, to give our children the best possible start in life." Sophia comes from a very prominent family in Newport. Her father owns a chain of luxury hotels. We need to maintain a certain standard. I thought about my own childhood, growing up in a modest apartment above my father's corner grocery store. I thought about working 3 jobs to pay for medical school, about the years of residency when I lived on coffee and determination. I thought about James, who had started with nothing and built his success through relentless effort and careful planning. "Marcus," I said quietly, "when was the last time you felt proud of something you accomplished on your own?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, something flickered across his face that might have been uncertainty. Then, the mask of entitlement slipped back into place. "I'm proud of choosing Sophia," he said. "I'm proud of building a life that honors the success you and Dad created. Not everyone needs to grind themselves into dust to prove their worth, Mom. Some of us are smart enough to recognize opportunity when it's presented." "Opportunity?" I echoed. "Is that what you call your inheritance?" "I call it my birthright," he replied, his voice hardening. "Look, I didn't come here to debate philosophy with you. I came to tell you that Sophia and I expect you to transfer full control of the trust to me by the end of the month. We have vendors to pay, deposits to make. I'm not going to keep jumping through hoops for access to my own money." "Your own money," I repeated, and something in my tone must have warned him because he straightened in his chair. "Yes, my money. Dad left it to me. Your father left it in trust for you, with me as the trustee, specifically because he wanted to ensure it would be managed responsibly." Marcus stood up abruptly, his face flushing with anger. "Responsibly? You mean you wanted to maintain control, over me indefinitely. You've never been able to accept that I'm an adult capable of making my own decisions. What decisions have you made, Marcus? The question came out sharper than I intended. You've been living off family money since you graduated. You've never held a job for more than 6 months. You've never paid rent, never worried about health insurance, never experienced the reality that 99% of people live with every day. So this is about punishment, he said, his voice rising. You want me to suffer because you had to work your way up. Well, I'm sorry I wasn't born into poverty, Mom. I'm sorry I had the advantage of a successful family. This isn't about punishment, I said, standing to face him. This is about understanding that money comes with responsibility. Your father didn't build his wealth so you could spend it on designer engagement rings and lavish weddings. He built it so you could build something of your own. Something of my own, Marcus laughed bitterly. Easy to say when you've already had your career, your success. You want me to start from zero while sitting on millions of dollars that rightfully belong to me. They don't rightfully belong to you until you're 35, Marcus. That was your father's decision, not mine. Then change it, he demanded. Override his decision. Prove that you actually want your son to be happy. The manipulation in his words was so naked, so clearly learned from years of getting his way through emotional pressure, that I felt something inside me shift. This wasn't my child asking for support. This was a stranger attempting to extort money from me using our relationship as leverage. I need some time to think about this, I said finally. Time to think about what? It's a simple request, Mom. Sign the papers, transfer the trust, and let me live my life. It's not that simple, Marcus. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something calculating creep into his expression. You know, Sophia's father has some very influential friends, legal friends. They've mentioned that trust arrangements from decades ago don't always hold up under modern scrutiny, especially when they seem designed to maintain inappropriate control over adult beneficiaries. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. I felt my heart rate spike, not from fear, but from a kind of shocked disbelief. Are you threatening to sue me? I'm suggesting that there are options if you continue to be unreasonable. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of my house, now. Marcus's confident facade cracked slightly. Mom, you're overreacting. I'm just trying to discuss our family situation like adults. Adults don't threaten their parents with lawsuits for access to money they haven't earned. Adults don't manipulate family relationships for financial gain. Get out, Marcus. He left, but not before delivering a parting shot that chilled me. This isn't over, Mother. I'm not going to let you destroy my future because of some outdated ideas about earning what's mine. After he was gone, I sat in my office for hours, staring at the trust account statements. $2,400,000. The number represented years of James's life, countless 18-hour days, missed dinners, and postponed vacations. It represented my own contributions, money I had added from my surgeon's salary to ensure Marcus would have every possible advantage. That night, I called my attorney, Patricia Kim, a sharp woman in her 50s who had handled James's estate planning. Patricia, I need to understand exactly what options I have regarding Marcus's trust fund. Eleanor, it's 11 o'clock at night. Is everything all right? I told her about my conversation with Marcus, including his veiled threat about legal challenges. Patricia listened without interruption, her lawyer's mind processing the implications. The trust is ironclad, she said finally. James was very specific about the terms. Marcus has no legal standing to challenge your trusteeship before his 35th birthday unless he can prove malfeasance or incompetence on your part. What about the withdrawals he's been making? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Those are within the terms of the trust as long as you approved them. However, Eleanor, you need to understand that as trustee, you have not just the right, but the responsibility to deny withdrawals that aren't in the beneficiary's best interest. Even if he's legally entitled to access the funds, the trust doesn't give him unlimited access. It gives him access to funds for education, reasonable living expenses, and investments that serve his long-term interests. Lavish wedding expenditures and luxury lifestyle choices could be argued to fall outside those parameters. After ending the call, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. I placed a freeze on all non-essential withdrawals from Marcus's trust fund. No more payments for wedding venues, no more transfers for luxury apartments, or expensive cars. If my son wanted to live like a wealthy man, he would need to find a way to earn it. The next morning, I drove to the bank and met with the trust officer to implement the restrictions. Then I went to work at the hospital, performing surgery on a 6-year-old girl whose parents had driven 12 hours to reach our facility because it was the only place their insurance would cover the procedure she needed. As I worked, my hands, steady and precise as they had been for 20 years, I thought about value and purpose. I thought about the parents in the waiting room, probably calculating whether they could afford to take another day off work. I thought about my son, who was at that moment probably discovering that his credit card had been declined at some expensive restaurant. I finished the surgery successfully. The little girl would make a full recovery, would grow up to live a normal life because of the skills I had spent decades developing. Driving home that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, a sense of alignment between my actions and my values. That feeling lasted exactly until I turned into my driveway and found Marcus waiting for me on the front porch, his face dark with fury. "We need to talk," he said, not bothering with a greeting. "Of course," I replied, though I braced myself for what was coming. Inside, Marcus didn't waste time with pleasantries. The bank called Sophia's wedding planner. Our deposit check bounced. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I imagine it was very embarrassing, I said, hanging up my coat. Would you like some coffee? We should probably sit down for this conversation. I don't want coffee, Mom. I want to know why you've sabotaged my wedding. I haven't sabotaged anything, Marcus. I've implemented some controls on the trust fund to ensure the money is being used appropriately. Appropriately? His voice rose to near shouting level. You mean according to your narrow, judgmental standards? This is my money, and I should be able to use it however I see fit. It's not your money yet, I corrected gently. And even when it becomes yours, that doesn't change the fact that it represents your father's life's work. Don't you think it should be treated with some respect? Don't you dare bring Dad into this, Marcus snapped. He would want me to be happy. He would want me to have a beautiful wedding with the woman I love. Your father would want you to earn your happiness, not purchase it. Easy to say when you've already had your career, your success, your time to build something. Now you want to deny me the same opportunities. I'm not denying you opportunities, Marcus. I'm trying to help you understand that real opportunities come from effort, not inheritance. That's rich, coming from someone who married into money herself. The comment hit me like a physical blow. What did you say? You heard me. You married Dad when he was already successful. You didn't build that real estate empire, he did. And now you want to lecture me about earning what I have? I stared at my son, this man I had carried for 9 months, nursed through childhood, illnesses, cheered at school plays and graduation ceremonies. The casual cruelty in his voice was devastating, but worse was the realization that this was how he truly saw me. Marcus, I said quietly, I was finishing my surgical residency when I met your father. I was 28 years old, working 80-hour weeks, living in a studio apartment and surviving on instant noodles. Your father was successful, yes, but he was also kind and ambitious and shared my values. I didn't marry him for his money. But you didn't refuse it either, did you? No, I didn't refuse it. Just like I didn't refuse to give up my career for 3 years to stay home with you when you were small. Just like I didn't refuse to work part-time for another 5 years so I could be available for school events and soccer games. Just like I didn't refuse to contribute my own earnings to your trust fund to make sure you had every possible advantage. Oh, so now I'm supposed to be grateful for your sacrifices? Sacrifices you chose to make? I'm not asking for gratitude, Marcus. I'm asking for understanding. I'm asking you to recognize that the money you're spending so casually represents real sacrifice, real work, real commitment to family. And I'm asking you to recognize that I'm a grown man who doesn't need his mother's permission to live his life. We stared at each other across the living room, and I realized we had reached an impasse that went far deeper than money. This was about fundamentally different understandings of responsibility, family, and what it meant to be an adult. The restrictions on the trust fund will remain in place, I said finally. If you want to have an expensive wedding, you'll need to find a way to pay for it yourself. Fine, Marcus said, his voice cold and controlled. Then I guess I'll have to explore other options. He left without another word, and I spent the evening wondering what those other options might entail. I didn't have to wait long to find out. The first sign came 3 days later when I received a call from Patricia Kim. Eleanor, I need to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way. Have you been experiencing any memory issues? Lately, any problems with confusion or disorientation? The question was so unexpected that I laughed. Not at all. Why would you ask that? I received a very concerning call today from a lawyer representing Marcus. He's claiming that you've been showing signs of dementia and that your recent decisions regarding the trust fund are evidence of diminished capacity. The words hit me like ice water. He's what? It gets worse. He's apparently collected statements from several people who claim to have witnessed episodes of confusion on your part. The lawyer was very detailed about specific incidents. What incidents? Patricia, I perform complex surgeries every week. I'm evaluated regularly by the hospital board. There's absolutely nothing wrong with my mental faculties. I believe you, Eleanor, but Marcus seems to be building a case that you're no longer competent to serve as trustee. If he can convince a judge that you're experiencing cognitive decline, he could potentially gain control of the trust fund immediately. I sank into my desk chair, my mind racing. Who gave him these statements? I don't have all the details yet, but apparently his fiancée and some of her friends have signed affidavits describing conversations where you seemed disoriented or made repetitive statements. I've had exactly one conversation with Sophia, and I was perfectly coherent throughout. Like I said, I believe you. But Eleanor, you need to understand how serious this is. If Marcus succeeds in having you declared incompetent, it won't just affect the trust fund. It could impact your medical license, your ability to make your own financial decisions, everything. After ending the call, I sat in my office trying to process what I had just learned. My son was attempting to have me declared mentally incompetent in order to access his inheritance. The child I had raised, educated, and supported was willing to destroy my reputation and career for money. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my older sister, Rebecca, who lived in Portland with her husband and twin daughters. Ellie, she said, her voice warm with surprise. It's been too long. How are you? I broke down completely, sobbing into the phone as I told her everything that had happened. Rebecca listened without judgment, occasionally making small sounds of sympathy or outrage. Oh, honey, she said when I finished. I'm so sorry, but I have to ask, have you considered that maybe this is the wake-up call you needed? What do you mean? Marcus has been taking advantage of you for years. Ever since James died, you've been enabling behavior that would have horrified your husband. Maybe it's time to stop protecting Marcus from the consequences of his choices. He's my son, Rebecca. And you're his mother, not his personal bank. Ellie, you're one of the most brilliant people I know. You save children's lives for a living. But when it comes to Marcus, you've been blind to what everyone else can see. Which is what? That he's become entitled, manipulative, and completely disconnected from reality. The fact that he's willing to claim you're mentally incompetent to get access to money should tell you everything you need to know about his character. That night, I lay awake thinking about Rebecca's words. I thought about James, about the values he had tried to instill in Marcus. I thought about the little girl I had operated on earlier that week, and her parents' grateful tears when I told them the surgery had been successful. I thought about purpose and legacy, and what it really meant to be a mother. The next morning, I made an appointment with my own physician and requested a complete cognitive evaluation. If Marcus wanted to claim I was incompetent, I would arm myself with irrefutable medical evidence to the contrary. Then I called Patricia and asked her to begin gathering documentation about Marcus's spending patterns and lifestyle choices. What are you thinking, Eleanor? I'm thinking that if Marcus wants to play legal games, he should be prepared for the consequences. The trust was established to provide security and opportunity, not to fund a lifestyle of leisure and luxury. If he's going to challenge my competency, maybe it's time to question whether he's mature enough to handle this inheritance at all. Are you considering revoking the trust entirely? The question stopped me cold. I hadn't consciously considered it, but now that she had voiced it, I realized it was exactly what I was considering. The trust can be modified under certain circumstances, can it? If the beneficiary demonstrates that he's unable to handle financial responsibility, or if his behavior threatens the purpose of the trust, yes. But Eleanor, that's a nuclear option. If you go down that path, you're essentially disinheriting your own son. He's trying to have me declared mentally incompetent for money, Patricia. I think he's already made his choice about what our relationship means to him. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched my son's legal maneuvering with a kind of detached fascination. The lawyer he had hired was aggressive and expensive, clearly funded by sources I could only guess at. Sophia's family connections, perhaps, or loans secured against his expected inheritance. The cognitive evaluation came back exactly as I had expected. Perfect scores across all measures, with the doctor noting that my mental acuity was exceptional for someone of any age. But Marcus's legal team seemed undeterred, filing motions and gathering testimonies with the relentless efficiency of people who believed they were close to a significant payday. It was during this period that I made a discovery that changed everything. I was cleaning out James's old desk, something I had been putting off for years, when I found a sealed envelope tucked behind a drawer. My name was written on it in James's distinctive handwriting, along with a note. Open only if Marcus's character becomes a concern. Inside was a letter dated just 6 months before James's death, along with a second set of legal documents I had never seen before. My darling, Eleanor, the letter began, if you're reading this, then I fear my worst concerns about our son have proven justified. I've watched Marcus carefully over the past few years, and I've seen troubling signs of entitlement and lack of empathy that worry me deeply. The trust fund I established was always meant to be a backup plan, not the primary plan. The primary plan was that Marcus would develop into a man of character who wouldn't need financial support beyond what any parent might normally provide. I read on with growing astonishment as James detailed observations he had made about Marcus's behavior, manipulative tactics he had witnessed, and concerns about our son's fundamental understanding of responsibility and family loyalty. The enclosed documents establish a second trust, funded separately, that will only be activated if Marcus ever attempts to challenge your authority as trustee, or if he demonstrates through his actions that he values money over family relationships. This trust is designed to support causes that reflect our true values: education, healthcare, and community service. If Marcus proves unworthy of his inheritance, perhaps it can serve a higher purpose. The second trust contained $8 million, funded entirely from James's personal accounts without my knowledge. It was designed to support scholarships for underprivileged students, medical research, and community health initiatives. I sat in James's old chair, holding his letter, and realized that my husband had foreseen exactly what was happening now. He had loved Marcus but had not been blind to his flaws, and he had trusted me to make the right decision when the time came. That night, Marcus's legal assault reached a new level of cruelty. I received a call from the chief of surgery at the hospital informing me that questions had been raised about my mental competency and that I would need to undergo a formal evaluation by the hospital's psychiatric staff. "This is just a formality, Eleanor," Dr. Martinez assured me. "Everyone who works with you knows these claims are ridiculous, but we have to follow protocol when allegations are made." "I understand," I said. Though inside I was reeling. Marcus was willing to jeopardize my career, my reputation, everything I had worked for, in pursuit of money that wasn't even legally his yet. The hospital evaluation was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, I was placed on administrative leave, meaning I couldn't perform surgeries or see patients. For the first time in 20 years, I was forced to stay home and contemplate the wreckage my family relationships had become. It was during this forced hiatus that Sophia made her first direct contact with me. She appeared at my door on a Thursday afternoon, dressed in yoga clothes and carrying an expensive handbag, looking like she was stopping by between Pilates and lunch. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I was hoping we could have a little chat." I invited her in, curious about what approach she might take. I had expected anger or manipulation, but Sophia seemed to be going for concerned understanding. "I want you to know that I think this whole legal situation is terribly unfortunate," she began, settling onto my sofa with practiced grace. "Marcus is just so frustrated, you know? He feels like you don't trust him to make adult decisions." "I see," I said neutrally. "The thing is, Mrs. Hartwell, I come from a family that understands wealth and responsibility. My father has taught me that money is a tool, and like any tool, it needs to be used wisely. Marcus and I aren't frivolous people. We want to build something meaningful together." "What sort of something?" "Well, we're considering opening a boutique consulting firm. Marcus has such valuable insights about philosophy and human nature, and I have connections throughout the hospitality industry. We could provide lifestyle and wellness consulting to high-net-worth individuals." I almost laughed at the transparent ridiculousness of it. A consulting firm built on Marcus's philosophy degree and Sophia's social connections, funded by inheritance money, and designed to serve wealthy people who wanted to be told how to live better lives. "That sounds very ambitious," I managed. "It is. But we have the vision and the background to make it work. The only thing holding us back is access to startup capital and, well, the uncertainty about the trust fund situation." Here it was, the real reason for her visit. "I see. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm going to be very direct with you because I think you're a woman who appreciates honesty. Marcus is going to get that money eventually, one way or another. The legal process might take months or even years, and it's going to be expensive and painful for everyone involved. Wouldn't it be better to resolve this amicably?" "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you could demonstrate your confidence in Marcus's judgment by releasing the funds now, voluntarily. Show the world that you trust your son and support his future. It would make you look generous and loving, not controlling." The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, that I found myself almost admiring its execution. Sophia had clearly learned from masters. "And if I don't?" For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating underneath. "Well, I hope it doesn't come to that. Marcus loves you very much, Mrs. Hartwell. He would hate for this situation to damage your relationship permanently." "Is that a threat, Sophia?" "Of course not," she said, the bright smile returning. "I'm just saying that family relationships are so precious, aren't they? It would be tragic if money came between a mother and son. After she left, I sat in my living room thinking about threats and manipulation, about family relationships and what they really meant. I thought about James's letter and his warning about Marcus's character. I thought about the little girl whose surgery I had performed and her parents' humble gratitude. That evening, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. I called Patricia Kim and asked her to begin the process of activating James's secondary trust fund, while simultaneously initiating proceedings to revoke Marcus's primary inheritance. Eleanor, are you absolutely certain about this? Once we start down this path, there's no going back. I'm certain, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. Marcus has made his choice about what matters to him. Now I'm making mine. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal filings and medical evaluations. The hospital's psychiatric evaluation confirmed what I already knew. I was completely mentally competent, and the allegations against me were baseless. Dr. Martinez called personally to apologize for the necessity of the evaluation and to assure me that I would be fully reinstated. Meanwhile, Patricia was building an ironclad case for revoking Marcus's trust fund based on his demonstrated financial irresponsibility and his attempts to manipulate the legal system for personal gain. The evidence was overwhelming. The excessive withdrawals, the luxury lifestyle, the legal assault on my competency, all documented with careful precision. But Marcus wasn't giving up. If anything, his attacks became more desperate and more cruel. He began calling neighbors and colleagues, spreading rumors about my mental state. He contacted the medical board with complaints about my fitness to practice. He even went so far as to file a police report claiming I had threatened him, though, thankfully, the officers who responded quickly realized the claim was baseless. It was Sophia who delivered the final blow that sealed their fate. I was returning from a grocery shopping trip when I found her waiting by my front door, her composed facade finally cracking to reveal the anger underneath. "You're really going to do this, aren't you?" she said without preamble. "You're really going to destroy your own son out of spite." "I'm not destroying anyone, Sophia. I'm making decisions about money that belongs to my family. That money belongs to Marcus. It's his birthright, his future. How can you be so selfish?" Selfish? The accusation was so absurd that I almost smiled. I've spent the last 32 years putting Marcus's needs before my own. I think that gives me the right to expect some basic respect in return. Respect? Sophia's voice rose to a near shriek. "You want respect? Fine. Let me tell you what I really think. You're a bitter old woman who can't stand to see her son happy. You've spent so many years controlling him that you can't bear to let him go. This isn't about money. It's about your pathetic need to maintain power over a grown man. Is that really what you think? I think you're a selfish, controlling narcissist who's willing to destroy her own family rather than admit she's wrong. And I think Marcus deserves better than a mother who would rather see him fail than succeed without her." The words were designed to hurt, and they did. But they also clarified something important for me. This was how Sophia really saw me, and probably how Marcus saw me too. Not as a mother who had sacrificed and supported and loved, but as an obstacle to their desires. "Thank you for being so honest," I said quietly. "So you'll release the funds?" "No, Sophia. I'll continue with the revocation proceedings. And I think you should know that this conversation has been very helpful in confirming that I'm making the right decision." "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice turning cold and threatening. "Marcus has friends, connections. This isn't over." "No," I agreed. "I don't suppose it is. But I was wrong about that. It was over, much sooner than I expected, and in a way I never could have predicted." 2 days later, I was preparing for bed when I heard Marcus's key in the front door. I had been expecting this confrontation, had been dreading it, but knowing it was inevitable. "Mother," he called, his voice carrying through the house with an edge I had never heard before. "We need to talk, now." I found him in the living room, pacing like a caged animal. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his expensive shirt wrinkled, his hair uncombed. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he demanded as soon as he saw me. "The bank called today. They've frozen everything. The wedding venue, the caterer, Sophia's dress designer, all demanding payment that I can't make because my own mother has sabotaged my access to my own money. Marcus, please sit down. Let's discuss this calmly." "Calmly?" He laughed, but there was no humor. The morning after our confrontation, I woke to find Marcus gone, but not before he had ransacked my home office. File cabinets stood open, papers scattered across the floor, and my computer monitor displayed multiple failed login attempts. The desperation was evident in every overturned drawer and empty folder. He had been searching for something, anything, that might give him leverage or access to funds I had secured. I spent the morning methodically documenting the damage with photographs, knowing that this latest violation would only strengthen my case. As I collected scattered documents, I found something that made my blood run cold. Hidden beneath overturned papers was a printed email thread between Marcus and someone named David Chen, dated just 3 days earlier. The subject line read, "Alternative financing options," and the content made me understand just how far my son had fallen. David, apparently a private lender, was offering Marcus a substantial loan secured against his expected inheritance. The terms were predatory, with interest rates that would have consumed the entire trust fund within 5 years. But Marcus had already signed preliminary agreements. What horrified me more than the financial implications was a particular exchange. Buried in the thread, David had asked about potential obstacles to Marcus receiving his inheritance, and my son's response was chillingly casual. "My mother might be a problem, but I'm working on a permanent solution to that issue. She's getting older and has been showing signs of instability. If necessary, I can arrange for her to require supervised care." Supervised care. The euphemism sent ice through my veins. Marcus wasn't just planning to have me declared incompetent for financial purposes. He was considering having me institutionalized to remove me as an obstacle entirely. I photographed every page of the email thread, then called Patricia immediately. When I read her the relevant passages, the silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Eleanor," she said finally, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This goes far beyond a simple trust dispute. If Marcus is conspiring to have you institutionalized for financial gain, we're talking about elder abuse, possibly even criminal charges. What do? We document everything and we accelerate our timeline. I was planning to file the revocation papers next week, but given this development, I think we need to move immediately. Can you be in my office this afternoon?" "Of course." "And Eleanor, don't stay in that house alone tonight. If Marcus is desperate enough to consider having you committed, I don't want you in a vulnerable position." I spent the afternoon in Patricia's office, signing papers that would formally begin the process of revoking Marcus's trust fund. The legal language was complex, but the essence was simple. Marcus had demonstrated through his actions that he lacked the character and judgment necessary to responsibly manage his inheritance. "The hearing is scheduled for next Friday," Patricia explained. "Marcus will have 1 week to respond to the filing. Given his recent behavior, I expect he'll fight this aggressively." What should I expect? Desperation makes people dangerous, Eleanor. Marcus is facing the loss of what he considers his financial future. He may become increasingly erratic. That evening, I took Patricia's advice and drove to a hotel downtown. As I checked in under an assumed name, paying cash to avoid leaving an electronic trail, I felt like I was fleeing from my own child. The thought was so absurd. so far from anything I had ever imagined, that I sat in the hotel room staring at the generic artwork on the walls and wondering how my family had reached this point. My phone rang at 11 o'clock. Marcus's name appeared. On the screen, and against my better judgment, I answered. "Where are you?" His voice was strained, exhausted. "I'm safe, Marcus. That's all you need to know." "Mom, we need to talk. I came by the house and you weren't there. I was worried." The concern in his voice might have been genuine, but after reading his emails about permanent solutions, I couldn't trust my own son's expressions of care. "I don't think we have anything to discuss right now." "Please," he said, and for a moment he sounded like the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. "I know things have gotten out of hand. I know I've made mistakes. But we're family, Mom. We should be able to work this out." "Marcus, did you break into my office last night?" The pause was answer enough, but he tried to deflect anyway. "I was looking for some old documents of Dad's. I have a right to family papers. You destroyed my personal property and attempted to access my private computer files. I was frustrated, okay? Everything is falling apart, and I felt like you weren't listening to me." "And the loan you've arranged with David Chen?" Another pause, longer this time. "How do you know about that?" "Does it matter?" "Marcus, you've borrowed money against an inheritance you may not receive, at terms that would bankrupt you even if you did receive it. Don't you see how destructive this path is?" "It's a bridge loan, Mom, just to cover expenses until the trust issues are resolved. At 40% interest, Marcus. Even you must understand that those aren't legitimate business terms." "I don't have a choice." The facade of calm cracked, revealing the panic underneath. "Do you know what it's like to have vendors calling every day demanding payment? To have Sophia's family treating me like a fraud because I can't cover basic wedding expenses? I'm humiliated, Mom. Every day, I'm more humiliated." "Then get a job," I said quietly. "Find work, earn money, build something of your own. That's what your father would have done. Dad never had to start from nothing while his family's money sat in accounts he couldn't access." "Your father started with much less than nothing, Marcus. He had debt, no connections, and parents who worked 16-hour days just to pay rent. The money you think you're entitled to didn't exist when he was your age. So I should suffer because he suffered? That makes no sense. You should work because work gives life meaning. You should earn because earning teaches you the value of what you have." "Philosophy from someone who married into wealth," he said bitterly, echoing his earlier accusation. "I never married into wealth, Marcus. I married a man who was ambitious and hardworking, and I contributed to our family's success through my own career. The money in your trust fund didn't exist. When your father and I got married, we built it together through decades of joint effort. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Mom, the bottom line is that you're destroying my future out of some twisted need for control. The bottom line, Marcus, is that you've demonstrated you're not ready for the responsibility that comes with wealth." "Fine," he said, his voice turning cold. "Then I guess we'll let the courts decide who's right." He hung up, and I sat in the hotel room feeling something I had never experienced before. Genuine fear of my own child. Not physical fear, but something deeper. Fear of what he had become, what he might be capable of, how far he might go to get what he wanted. The next morning brought a call from Patricia that confirmed my worst fears. "Eleanor, Marcus's legal team filed an emergency motion last night. They're claiming you're mentally incompetent and requesting immediate guardianship proceedings." "Based on what evidence?" "They've submitted affidavits from 8 different people claiming to have witnessed episodes of confusion, memory loss, and erratic behavior on your part." 8 people? "Patricia, I barely know 8 people outside of work." "That's what concerns me. Several of these names appear to be Sophia's friends and family members. People who've had minimal contact with you but are claiming detailed knowledge of your mental state. They're fabricating evidence. Almost certainly. But Eleanor, you need to understand how serious this is. If a judge grants their emergency motion, you could be placed under guardianship within days. That would mean losing control of your own finances, your medical decisions, possibly even where you live. I felt the room spin slightly as the implications hit me. Can they do that? Can they really have me declared incompetent based on false testimony? If the right judge hears the case on the wrong day, yes. The system is designed to protect vulnerable adults, which means sometimes it acts quickly on incomplete information. What do? We fight back immediately. I'm filing counter motions today, and I need you to see a neurologist for a comprehensive evaluation. We need medical experts who can testify to your competency. When is the hearing? Monday morning, 3 days from now. I spent the weekend in a blur of medical appointments and legal preparations. The neurologist, Dr. Sarah Chen, was thorough and reassuring. Mrs. Hartwell, your cognitive function is exceptional. Your memory, reasoning ability, and decision-making capacity all test well above average for someone of any age. These allegations are clearly baseless. But even with expert medical opinion on my side, I couldn't shake the anxiety that settled in my chest like a physical weight. Marcus was playing for everything now, and he had allies I was still discovering. The revelation came Sunday evening, when Rebecca called from Portland. Ellie, I got the strangest call today from someone claiming to be conducting a wellness check on you. What kind of wellness check? A woman named Jennifer Morrison. She said she was a social worker investigating reports of elder self-neglect. She wanted to know when I had last spoken to you, whether I had concerns about your ability to care for yourself. Rebecca, I've never heard of Jennifer Morrison, and I certainly haven't requested any kind of social services intervention. I figured as much. Ellie, this woman asked very specific questions about your living situation, your relationship with Marcus, whether you had been making unusual financial decisions lately. What did you tell her? I told her she could talk to my lawyer if she had concerns about my sister's welfare. But honey, this sounds coordinated. Someone is building a very detailed case against you. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about the web of lies being constructed around me, the careful way Marcus and his allies were creating a narrative of incompetence and neglect. By morning, I felt like I was drowning in accusations I couldn't disprove because they were entirely fictional. Monday morning arrived gray and rainy, perfectly matching my mood as Patricia and I walked into the courthouse. The hearing was in Judge Elizabeth Harper's chambers, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for fairness, but also for decisive action when she believed a vulnerable adult was at risk. Marcus was already there with his legal team, an expensive-looking group led by a sharp-featured man in his 40s. Sophia sat in the back row, her face a mask of concerned sympathy that might have fooled someone who didn't know better. Your Honor, Marcus's lawyer began, we're here because of serious concerns about Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell's mental capacity and her ability to manage significant financial assets responsibly. What followed was a carefully orchestrated character assassination. Witness after witness took the stand to describe incidents of confusion, forgetfulness, and poor judgment on my part. Sophia testified tearfully about conversations where I had seemed disoriented and paranoid. Her friends described visiting my home and finding it in disarray, though I knew for certain that most of them had never set foot in my house. The most damaging testimony came from someone I had never seen before, a woman named Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, who claimed to have treated me for anxiety and depression. According to her testimony, I had been prescribed medications that could affect cognitive function and had missed several appointments due to confusion about dates and times. Your Honor, Patricia interjected when Dr. Rodriguez finished. I'd like to point out that my client has never been a patient of Dr. Rodriguez. We have medical records from Mrs. Hartwell's actual physicians that directly contradict this testimony. Objection noted, Judge Harper replied. Dr. Rodriguez, Can you provide documentation of your treatment relationship with Mrs. Hartwell? I'm afraid the records were destroyed in a recent office fire, Dr. Rodriguez replied smoothly. But I can provide detailed notes from memory. It was so obviously fabricated that I wanted to scream, but Judge Harper's expression remained neutral. She was listening to everything, weighing evidence, trying to determine what was true. When it was our turn to present our case, Patricia was methodical and thorough. She presented the recent neurological evaluation, testimony from my colleagues at the hospital, and documentation of my continued competent performance as a surgeon. Your Honor, she said in conclusion, the evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Hartwell is mentally competent and fully capable of managing her own affairs. The allegations against her appear to be motivated by financial gain rather than genuine concern for her welfare. Dr. Hartwell, Judge Harper addressed me directly. I'd like to ask you a few questions. For the next 20 minutes, she probed my understanding of the trust fund issues, my relationship with Marcus, and my decision-making process regarding the family finances. I answered each question clearly and directly, feeling more confident as the conversation progressed. Dr. Hartwell, she said finally, can you explain to me why your son believes you're not competent to manage his trust fund? Your Honor, I believe Marcus is frustrated because I've placed restrictions on withdrawals that he considers excessive. He's accustomed to having unlimited access to family money, and my recent decisions to limit that access have created conflict between us. Are these restrictions based on concerns about his financial judgment? Yes, Your Honor. Marcus has withdrawn nearly $200,000 in the past 6 months for what I consider non-essential expenses. The trust was established to provide security and opportunity, not to fund an extravagant lifestyle. And you believe you have the authority to make those determinations? I believe I have the responsibility to make those determinations, as the trustee appointed by my late husband specifically for that purpose. Judge Harper nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Marcus. Mr. Hartwell, can you explain to me why you believe your mother is not competent to serve as trustee? Marcus stood, looking more composed than I had seen him in weeks. Your Honor, my mother has been showing signs of paranoia and controlling behavior that seem to have worsened since my father's death. She's become increasingly isolated, suspicious of my relationship with my fiancé, and unwilling to discuss family financial matters rationally. Can you give me specific examples of behavior that concerns you? She's accused me of stealing from family accounts when I've only made withdrawals that were already approved. She's claimed that my fiancé and I are plotting against her. Most recently, she's threatened to disinherit me entirely unless I end my engagement and return to living under her direct supervision. The lies were so smooth, so believable, that for a moment I almost doubted my own memory of events. Marcus had clearly rehearsed this testimony, crafting a narrative that painted me as a controlling, paranoid mother unable to accept her adult son's independence. Dr. Hartwell, Judge Harper turned back to me. How do you respond to these allegations? Your Honor, I have never asked Marcus to end his engagement or return to living with me. I have never accused him of stealing, only of making withdrawals that I believe exceed the intended purpose of the trust. My concerns about his relationship with Sophia are based on their apparent focus on accessing family money rather than building an independent life together. I see. And the threat to disinherit him? I have initiated proceedings to revoke the trust based on Marcus's demonstrated inability to manage money responsibly and his recent attempts to have me declared incompetent for his financial benefit. Judge Harper's eyebrows rose slightly. You're claiming that these competency proceedings are motivated by financial gain? Yes, Your Honor. I believe Marcus is attempting to gain control of his trust fund by removing me as trustee through false allegations about my mental state. The judge looked back and forth between us, clearly weighing competing narratives. Finally, she spoke. This is a complex situation involving family dynamics, financial management, and serious allegations on both sides. However, based on the medical evidence presented and my own observations during these proceedings, I find no compelling evidence that Dr. Hartwell is mentally incompetent or unable to manage her own affairs. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but Judge Harper wasn't finished. However, I am concerned about the breakdown in communication between family members and the adversarial nature of this dispute. Therefore, I'm ordering a 30-day cooling-off period during which both parties will refrain from making any changes to the trust arrangement. During this period, I'm appointing an independent financial monitor to review all trust-related transactions and provide recommendations. It wasn't the complete victory I had hoped for, but it wasn't the disaster I had feared either. Marcus looked furious. His lawyer was already whispering urgently in his ear, and Sophia had gone pale in the back row. As we left the courthouse, Patricia was cautiously optimistic. The independent monitor is actually good news for us, Eleanor. They'll see exactly what Marcus has been spending money on, and it will support our case for revoking the trust. What about the cooling-off period? It protects you from further legal harassment for the next month. Marcus can't file any more competency challenges, and he can't access any additional funds from the trust. That evening, I returned to my house for the first time since Marcus had ransacked my office. Everything had been cleaned and organized by a service Patricia had hired, but the violation still lingered in the air. I walked through rooms that had once felt like a sanctuary, wondering if they would ever feel safe again. My phone rang as I was making dinner. The number was unknown, but when I answered, Sophia's voice came through clearly. "Mrs. Hartwell, I think it's time we had an honest conversation." I thought we had already said everything we needed to say to each other. "Sophia?" "Not quite. I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." "Marcus and I are willing to drop all legal challenges and accept whatever restrictions you want to place on the trust fund, but we need some immediate financial assistance." "How much assistance?" $50,000. Just enough to cover our current obligations and get us through the next few months while Marcus finds employment. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. "Sophia, you've spent the last month trying to have me declared mentally incompetent, and now you want me to give you money? I want us to find a way forward that doesn't destroy this family. The family was destroyed when Marcus chose money. Over relationships, Sophia. I didn't cause that." "Look, Mrs. Hartwell, I'm going to be direct with you. Marcus is under a lot of pressure right now. The loan he took out has some very serious conditions attached to it, and if he can't make payments, there could be consequences that go beyond financial embarrassment." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that involve people who don't accept bankruptcy as an excuse for non-payment." I felt ice form in my stomach. "Are you telling me that Marcus has borrowed money from criminals?" "I'm telling you that desperation makes people make poor choices, and sometimes those choices have implications for everyone around them." "Sophia, if Marcus is in danger from loan sharks or organized crime, the solution isn't to enable his poor decisions by giving him more money. The solution is to contact law enforcement." "And destroy his life completely?" "Mrs. Hartwell, these are not people who forget debts or forgive mistakes. If Marcus can't pay them back, they'll come after everything he has, including family members, who might have access to resources." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. I was being told that my refusal to provide money might result in violence against me or other family members. "Sophia, I want you to listen to me very carefully. If Marcus has involved himself with dangerous people, that's a consequence of his own choices. I will not be blackmailed into funding his lifestyle or paying his debts to criminals." "Then, you're willing to risk everyone's safety for the sake of principle?" "I'm willing to let adults face the consequences of their actions instead of enabling destructive behavior." "Fine," she said, her voice turning cold. "But don't say we didn't warn you about what might happen next." After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about threat escalation and wondering how far my son might go to get what he wanted. Then I did something I should have done weeks earlier. I called the police. Detective Michael Torres was a soft-spoken man in his 40s who specialized in financial crimes and elder abuse. He listened to my story with careful attention, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. Dr. Hartwell, what you're describing sounds like a coordinated effort to commit financial fraud through false allegations of incompetency. The threats about criminal loans add another dimension that concerns me. What can you do? I can open an investigation into the false testimony that was presented in court. Perjury is a serious crime, and if we can prove that witnesses lied under oath, we can pursue charges. As for the loan shark situation, we'll need more specific information before we can act. How do I get that information without putting myself in danger? You don't. If Marcus has really borrowed money from organized crime figures, the best thing you can do is maintain distance and let us handle any threats that arise. What about the independent monitor the judge appointed? That person will be a valuable ally in documenting the financial mismanagement. Their report will provide evidence for both the civil case about the trust fund and any criminal charges we might pursue. I left the police station feeling more hopeful than I had in weeks. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had professional allies who understood the seriousness of what was happening and had the authority to do something about it. That sense of hope lasted exactly 18 hours. I was in my garden, Tuesday morning, trying to find some peace in the familiar routine of tending to my roses, when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the garden gate, I could see a black sedan with tinted windows, expensive-looking and somehow ominous in its anonymity. Two men got out, both wearing dark suits despite the warm weather. They moved with the controlled precision of people, accustomed to intimidating others, and even from a distance, I could see that they were looking for someone. I slipped quietly into my house through the back door and called Detective Torres immediately. Dr. Hartwell, stay inside and away from windows, he instructed. I'm sending a patrol car immediately. For the next 20 minutes, I crouched in my pantry, listening to the sounds of movement around my property. The men were thorough, checking doors and windows, looking for weak points or easy access. When they rang the front doorbell, I didn't answer. When they knocked on the back door, I remained hidden. Finally, I heard the patrol car arrive, its radio chatter audible through my windows. The officers spoke briefly with the men in suits, who produced identification and claimed to be conducting a routine insurance investigation. Without grounds to detain them, the police had to let them go, but not before taking down their license, plate, and getting copies of their supposed credentials. After they left, Detective Torres came to take my statement. The license plate is registered to a company called Metro Consulting Services. On paper, they provide debt collection services, but they have connections to some very unsavory characters. So Marcus really has borrowed money from criminals. It looks that way. Dr. Hartwell, I need you to consider staying somewhere else for a while. These people are sending a message, and the message is that they know where you live. That afternoon, I checked back into the downtown hotel, this time for an indefinite stay. As I packed a suitcase with enough clothes for several weeks, I thought about how completely my life had been turned upside down by my son's greed and poor judgment. My phone rang as I was locking up the house. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and this time his voice carried a note of genuine panic. Mom, we need to talk. Right now. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street in an hour. Marcus, I don't think meeting in person is a good idea right now. Mom, please, this is important. I think I'm in real trouble. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The coffee shop was public and well lit, and Detective Torres had given me his direct number to call if I felt threatened. Marcus was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee like it was the only thing keeping him warm. He looked terrible, unshaven and hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes he had worn to court 2 days earlier. "Mom," he said as I sat down across from him, "I think I've made some serious mistakes." "What kind of mistakes, Marcus?" "The loan I told you about? The one from David Chen? It turns out he's connected to people who don't just charge interest. They charge insurance." "What does that mean?" "It means they want guarantees that go beyond just my signature on a promissory note. They want collateral that includes family assets." I felt my blood turn cold. "What kind of family assets?" "Everything, Mom. The house, your investment accounts, even your medical practice. I signed papers that put it all at risk." "Marcus, you can't pledge assets that don't belong to you." "I know that now. But when I signed the papers, I thought I would have access to the trust fund by now. I thought this would all be resolved quickly." "How much do you owe them?" "With penalties and interest, about $300,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $300,000 to people who had already demonstrated their willingness to use intimidation and violence. "When is it due?" 2 weeks from today." I stared at my son across the coffee shop table, this man who had destroyed our family relationship for money he didn't have and couldn't get. "Marcus, what exactly are you asking me to do?" "I'm asking you to save my life, Mom. These people don't negotiate. If I can't pay them, they'll take everything and they'll hurt anyone who gets in their way. Including me. Including you." I thought about the men in dark suits who had visited my house, about Sophia's veiled threats, about Detective Torres's warnings. I thought about the choice I was being forced to make between my principles and my safety. "Marcus, if I were to help you with this debt, what guarantee do I have that it won't happen again?" "It won't happen again, I swear. This whole experience has been a wake-up call. I'll get a job. I'll live within my means. I'll never ask you for money again." "You've made promises before." "This is different, Mom. This is life and death." I studied his face, looking for any sign of the little boy I had raised, the child who had once brought me dandelions from the yard and told me I was the most beautiful woman in the world. That child was gone, replaced by a desperate man who had gambled away his future and was now asking me to gamble mine. "I need time to think about this," I said finally. "Time is something we don't have much of, Mom." 2 weeks is enough time to explore other options." "What other options?" "Bankruptcy, law enforcement, witness protection if necessary." "Mom, these people don't care about bankruptcy proceedings, and going to the police will just make them angrier." I stood up from the table, looking down, at my son who had become a stranger. "Marcus, I love you. I will always love you. But I won't enable your self-destruction anymore, even if it costs me everything." "So you're willing to let them kill me?" "I'm willing to let you face the consequences of your choices. There's a difference." I left him sitting in the coffee shop and drove back to my hotel, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. That night, I called Rebecca and told her everything. That had happened. "Ellie," she said when I finished, "you need to get out of town. Take an extended vacation, visit friends, anything to get away from this situation while the police handle it." "I can't run away from my own life, Rebecca." "You can run away from people who want to hurt you. There's no shame in protecting yourself." "But if I leave, what happens to Marcus?" "Marcus made his choices, honey. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." The next morning, I received a call from the independent financial monitor appointed by Judge Harper. Thomas Morrison was a certified public accountant with 30 years of experience in trust and estate management. "Dr. Hartwell, I've completed my initial review of the trust fund transactions, and I need to discuss my findings with you." "What did you discover?" "Your son has been extremely creative in his interpretation of allowable expenses. Luxury car payments classified as transportation needs, expensive restaurant meals listed as networking expenses, even the engagement ring categorized as a professional development investment. Professional development? Apparently, marriage to Sophia was described as essential for building business connections in the hospitality industry. I almost laughed despite the seriousness of the situation. What's your recommendation? Based on the pattern of expenditures and the recent legal challenges, I believe you have strong grounds for revoking the trust entirely. The beneficiary has demonstrated a fundamental inability to manage money responsibly. How long will your official report take? I'll have it completed by the end of the week. Judge Harper has scheduled a follow-up hearing for next Monday to review my findings. After the call, I sat in my hotel room thinking about endings and new beginnings. In 6 days, I would likely have legal authority to cut Marcus off from his inheritance entirely. The money that was meant to provide security and opportunity would instead go to charitable causes that reflected the values James and I had actually shared. But first, I had to survive the next 2 weeks. That afternoon, Detective Torres called with an update that changed everything. Dr. Hartwell, we've arrested David Chen and several of his associates on federal racketeering charges. It turns out your son's loan was part of a much larger operation targeting people with family wealth. What does that mean for Marcus? It means the immediate physical threat is probably over. These people are more concerned with avoiding additional federal charges than they are with collecting debts from one borrower. And the money Marcus owes them? If Chen's organization is shut down by federal prosecutors, those debts become uncollectible. Your son may have accidentally gotten very lucky. I felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Relief that the immediate danger was over. Frustration that Marcus would once again escape the consequences of his poor judgment through circumstances beyond his control. There's something else, Detective Torres continued. We've identified several of the witnesses who testified about your alleged incompetency. Most of them have connections to Chen's organization. It appears they were paid to provide false testimony. Can you prove that? We have financial records showing payments from Chen's company to these individuals immediately before they signed their affidavits. It's a clear case of perjury and conspiracy to commit fraud. What happens now? We'll be filing charges against everyone involved in the false testimony. That should put an end to any future challenges to your competency. That evening, I called Marcus to tell him about Chen's arrest. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with anxiety. Mom, did you hear what happened? Yes, Marcus. Detective Torres called me. So you know that the debt is probably gone. I know that the immediate threat is over. Yes. That's good news, right? We can put all this behind us and move forward. Marcus, the fact that you're not going to be physically harmed doesn't change what you did to our family. What I did? Mom, I was trying to build a life with the woman I love. Everything I did was motivated by wanting to provide for our future. Everything you did was motivated by wanting to avoid work and responsibility. The fact that criminals were willing to enable your lifestyle doesn't make your choices any less destructive. So even though the crisis is over, you're still going to proceed with revoking my inheritance? The crisis isn't over, Marcus. The crisis is that I have a son who was willing to risk his family's safety for money, who was willing to have his own mother declared incompetent for financial gain, who values wealth more than relationships. That's not fair, Mom. What's not fair is 32 years of unconditional love and support being repaid with manipulation and betrayal. I never meant for things to go this far. But they did go this far, Marcus. And now we both have to live with the consequences. Monday's hearing was brief and decisive. Thomas Morrison presented his findings to Judge Harper, documenting the pattern of irresponsible spending and financial mismanagement that characterized Marcus's relationship with his trust fund. Based on these findings, Judge Harper concluded, I'm granting Dr. Hartwell's petition to revoke the trust arrangement. The remaining funds will be transferred to the charitable foundation specified in the original trust documents. Marcus stood. As the judge spoke, his face cycling through shock, anger, and finally resignation. Sophia wasn't there, having apparently decided that a man without inheritance prospects wasn't worth supporting through legal proceedings. As we left the courthouse, Marcus walked beside me in silence until we reached the parking garage. "Mom," he said finally, "I know I've made mistakes, big mistakes, but I'm still your son." "Yes, Marcus, you're still my son, but you're not my responsibility anymore." "What am I supposed to do now?" "What everyone else does. Find work, earn money, build a life through your own effort." "I don't know how to do that." "Then you'll learn. It's never too late to develop character, Marcus." He stood there in the parking garage, 32 years old, and finally facing the reality that most people encounter in their 20s, the need to support themselves through their own work. "Will you help me? Not with money, but with advice, with support?" I looked at my son, this man who had caused so much pain and destruction in pursuit of unearned wealth. Despite everything he had done, he was still the child I had raised, still capable of change if he chose to embrace it. "Ask me again in a year," I said. "Show me that you're serious about building a different kind of life, and we'll talk about rebuilding our relationship." I drove away from the courthouse feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not hope that Marcus would change, though I still held on to that possibility, but hope that I had finally found the courage to stop enabling destructive behavior and start demanding better from the people I loved. The charitable foundation that would receive Marcus's inheritance was dedicated to providing educational scholarships for underprivileged students, exactly the kind of cause James would have supported. The money that Marcus had seen as his birthright would instead help dozens of young people build futures through their own effort and determination. 6 months after the courthouse hearing, I was back in my operating room, performing a delicate procedure on a 10-year-old boy whose parents had driven 8 hours to reach our facility. As I worked, my hands steady and sure, I marveled at how peaceful my life had become since cutting away the toxic elements that had been poisoning it. The house felt different now, cleaner somehow, as if removing Marcus's negative energy had allowed positive feelings to flow back in. I had changed the locks, installed a security system, and most importantly, established clear boundaries about who was welcome in my space and under what circumstances. Rebecca visited frequently, bringing her twin daughters who called me Aunt Ellie, and filled my home with the kind of joy I had forgotten was possible. We spent weekends gardening together, cooking elaborate meals, and talking about everything except the family drama that had consumed so much of my energy. The charitable scholarship fund was thriving beyond my expectations. 47 students had received assistance for their education, each one writing heartfelt letters about how the opportunity was changing their lives. Reading those letters, I felt something I had never experienced when watching Marcus spend his inheritance: genuine pride in how family money was being used. Marcus had tried to contact me several times in the first few months, but his messages followed a predictable pattern: initial anger and blame, followed by promises of change, followed by requests for assistance when his promises proved empty. I responded to none of them, having learned that engagement only encouraged more manipulation. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that he had eventually found work as a sales associate at an electronics store. Sophia had ended their engagement, within weeks of the inheritance being revoked, moving on to pursue a relationship with someone whose family wealth was more readily accessible. The justice of that outcome wasn't lost on me. My own life had expanded in ways I hadn't expected. Free from the constant stress of managing Marcus's financial crises and emotional manipulation, I had energy for new relationships and experiences. I joined a book club, started volunteering at a women's shelter, and even began dating a kind widower named Robert, whom I met at a hospital fundraiser. Robert understood loss and recovery in ways that Marcus never could. He had built his own successful business from nothing, raised 3 daughters as a single father after his wife's death, and approached life with the kind of quiet dignity that comes from facing real challenges with grace. "You seem lighter," he observed one evening as we walked through the botanical gardens near my home. "More present." "I feel lighter," I admitted. "It's amazing how much energy you have when you stop trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved." Hard lesson to learn with a child. The hardest, but necessary. That evening, as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset, my phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time in months, I felt curious rather than anxious about what he might want. "Hello, Marcus." "Mom." His voice was different, quieter, less demanding. "I was wondering if we could meet for coffee. I have some things I'd like to say to you." "What kind of things?" "Apologies, mostly, and maybe some questions about how to build a life that actually means something." I looked at Robert, who was reading quietly in the chair beside me, then at the garden I had spent months nurturing. Back to health. "I'm willing to listen, Marcus, but I won't be manipulated or guilt-tripped anymore." "I understand. I think I'm finally ready to have an honest conversation." We met the following Saturday at a small cafe near the university. Marcus looked different, thinner and more serious, wearing clothes that appeared to have been chosen for practicality rather than image. When he stood to greet me, there was something genuinely humble in his posture. "Thank you for coming," he said as we sat down. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. I deserve that." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup, a gesture that reminded me painfully of the scared little boy he had once been. "Mom, I need to tell you that you were right about everything. The money, the spending, the way I treated you and our family. You were right, and I was wrong." "What changed?" "Having to work for minimum wage while living in a studio apartment tends to provide clarity about the value of money. But more than that, I finally understood what you were trying to teach me about earning things versus expecting them." "Go on." "When I got that first paycheck, 40 hours of actual work for $280 after taxes, I realized I had been spending more than that on single dinners without thinking about it. The disconnect was so complete that I felt sick. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance, but saw only genuine shame and regret. I also realized, he continued, that I had never actually accomplished anything in my entire life. Not one thing I could point to and say I built that, or I earned that, or I made a difference there. Everything I had was given to me, and I repaid that generosity with entitlement and cruelty. Marcus, why are you telling me this now? Because I want to rebuild our relationship, but I want to do it honestly this time. No manipulation, no financial pressure, no ulterior motives. I want to earn your respect the same way I'm learning to earn everything else. That's going to take time, I know. And I'm prepared for the possibility that it might never happen. But I had to try. We talked for 2 hours, covering years of misunderstandings and hurt feelings. Marcus took responsibility for his behavior in ways I had never heard from him before. He asked about my work, my new relationships, my plans for the future, showing genuine interest in my life rather than viewing me as an obstacle to his desires. When we parted, he didn't ask for money, didn't request favors, didn't try to negotiate any changes to the trust fund situation. He simply thanked me for listening and asked if we could meet again in a month. "I want to show you that this change is real," he said. "Not tell you, show you." Over the following months, Marcus kept his word. He worked consistently, lived within his means, and slowly began building the kind of life that his father would have been proud of. He enrolled in community college courses to develop practical skills, volunteered at a local food bank, and eventually earned a promotion to assistant manager at his store. More importantly, he never asked me for anything. No loans, no assistance, no shortcuts to the life he wanted to build. When his car broke down, he took the bus until he could afford repairs. When his apartment lease increased, He found a cheaper place rather than seeking family help. The transformation was so complete that I sometimes wondered if this was the same person who had tried to have me declared incompetent just a year earlier. But the evidence was consistent. Marcus was finally learning to be an adult. 6 months. After our first coffee meeting, he called with news that surprised me. "Mom, I wanted you to know that I've been offered a management position with a different company. Better pay, more responsibility, but also more challenge." "That's wonderful, Marcus. You've earned it." "I have earned it, haven't I?" He sounded almost amazed by the concept. It feels different when you know you deserve something versus when you just expect it. Yes, it does. Mom, I also wanted to ask you something, and I want you to know that your answer won't change anything between us. What is it? Would you consider having dinner with me and Robert sometime? I'd like to meet the man who makes you happy. The request was so unexpected, so free of agenda or manipulation, that I felt tears spring to my eyes. I think that could be arranged. That dinner took place 2 weeks later in my dining room with a meal Marcus had insisted on cooking himself. He was nervous but genuine, asking Robert thoughtful questions about his business and his daughters, showing real interest in understanding the people who had become important to me. "Your son is a good man," Robert told me later as we cleaned dishes. "He's been through something difficult, but he came out the other side with his character intact." It took him a while to find that character. Sometimes the best people are the ones who had to work hardest to become who they're meant to be. A year after Marcus lost his inheritance, the scholarship fund hosted its first annual dinner for recipients and donors. Marcus had asked if he could attend, not as a family member, but as someone interested in supporting the cause. "I'd like to make a donation," he told me beforehand. "It's not much, just $500, but it's money I earned myself. Marcus, you don't need to do that." "Yes, I do. That money was supposed to be mine, and instead of earning it, I squandered it. This feels like a way to make amends." At the dinner, I watched Marcus talk with scholarship recipients, young people who reminded me of the man he might have become if he had learned earlier that accomplishment requires effort. His donation was modest compared to others, but it represented something more valuable than money: genuine change. That night, as I drove home from the event, I reflected on the journey that had brought our family to this point. The pain of the betrayal had been real, the fear during those dark months had been overwhelming, and the decision to cut Marcus off had been one of the hardest things I had ever done. But it had also been necessary. By refusing to enable his destructive behavior, by demanding that he face consequences for his choices, I had forced him to confront who he was and who he wanted to become. The man who had emerged from that confrontation was someone I could respect and eventually welcome back into my life. Standing in the rain that night 18 months ago, locked out of my own home by my own son, I had felt like my world was ending. What I couldn't see then was that it wasn't ending. It was beginning. Everything that came after, the pain and the struggle and the difficult choices, had led to something better. A family rebuilt on honesty instead of manipulation. A legacy focused on service instead of entitlement, and relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. Marcus would never inherit his father's money, but he had finally inherited something more valuable: his father's values. And in learning to earn his own way in the world, he had earned something that no trust fund could provide: genuine self-respect, and the knowledge that his accomplishments belonged to him alone. The rain had washed away more than just my illusions that night. It had washed away the dysfunction and toxicity that had been poisoning our family for years, making room for something healthier to grow in its place. Sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the most beautiful outcomes, and sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone you love is the opportunity to discover who they really are when they have to stand on their own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.